Welcome to Food and Facilities, an online show for West Coast Industrial Solutions magazine. Our goal is to cultivate knowledge to feed the world by focusing our quarterly trade issues on safety, compliance, and innovation within manufacturing, agriculture, food processing, and food and beverage industries. In this episode, we'll be discussing alternatives to bankruptcy with Ben Young, wellness and productivity with Laura Timbrook, and the Volt Institute with Kevin Fox. Welcome to Food and Facilities. I'm Tara Sweeney with West Coast Industrial Solutions magazine, and I'll be your host today. Today we'll be discussing alternatives to bankruptcy with Ben Young of JMBM LP, Wellness and Productivity with Laura Timbrook of Manufacturing Wellness Podcast, and Volt Institute with Kevin Fox. Make sure to subscribe to our magazine at wcismag.com for all of the safety and compliance news for manufacturing, food and beverage, food processing, and agriculture. And we're going to be attending the virtual California Facilities Expo, November 18th and 19th. It will be all online and it's free to attend. There will be virtual exhibits, on-demand conferences, and contests and offers. If you would like to attend, visit fenc.facilitiesexpo.com and contact George Runkle at grunkle@facilitiesexpo.com or call him at 925-309-9043, or you can reach out to Lisa Nagel at LNAGLE@facilitiesexpo.com or give her a call at 408-829-5111. And I will be bringing on my first guest, Bennett Young. He's a partner at Jeffer, Mingles, Butler, and Mitchell LLP, and you can reach him at bgy@jmbm.com. Good morning, Ben. How are you today?
Morning, Tara. I'm fine. Nice to be here.
Can you give our viewers and listeners a little background on who you are and about JMBM?
Yes, I'm Ben Young. I'm a bankruptcy lawyer with Jeffer, Mangles, Butler, and Mitchell. We're a mid-sized law firm headquartered in Los Angeles with offices in Orange County and San Francisco. We focus on middle market California businesses. I'm, as I said, a bankruptcy lawyer, and I've been practicing in that area for about 38 years, handling commercial bankruptcy matters involving debtors, creditors, troubled companies, all around this distressed business area.
And a lot of companies have been hard hit by the pandemic. Have you seen any specific industries affected especially?
Yes, I have, Tara. Initially, what I saw were businesses that relied on face-to-face interaction with their customers. So if you think of the obvious example of restaurants and retail, but gyms, concert promotion, anything that relied on groups of people getting together or interacting face-to-face. I've talked to schools, I've talked private schools, I've talked to camps. We've seen all those businesses were hit hard at the onset, and now it's moving a little bit up the supply chain. Businesses that have customers that are concentrated in those industries are starting to see distress because their customers are having problems. They're not ordering as much. They're not able to pay, and so there's issues moving up the chain, as I said.
And you contributed an article on alternatives to bankruptcy for us, but can you give us some reasons why a company might consider bankruptcy for an insolvency solution?
Yes, there's several reasons. One of them is that the directors of a company owe fiduciary duties to shareholders and creditors. They have an obligation to maximize the value of the business for the parties interested in it, which in an insolvent situation means the creditors. And so if directors and business owners don't do the right thing, they potentially expose themselves to liability. They can be sued. And bad enough to lose your business, but you don't want to lose your business and get sued. A Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which is a liquidation, can be a good route to wind up a business where there's no hope of salvaging it. A neutral fiduciary comes in, the bankruptcy trustee, and liquidates the business under the supervision of the court. And it's a nice, clean way to wind up a business that has failed. Chapter 11 offers an opportunity for a business that is salvageable to reorganize itself, return to profitability, and continue in business. And so the Chapter 11 contains a number of tools that allow the business to restructure its operations, to get out of burdensome contracts, to cure defaults under contracts that are beneficial to the business. There's an automatic stay that goes into effect that stops all litigation against the company and all collection actions. So the managers of the business get a breathing spell where they can try and figure it out and resolve the company's problems. And then the goal of a Chapter 11, of course, is to negotiate a repayment plan with creditors. And the bankruptcy process has a number of tools to achieve that. And then through orders of the court, whatever repayment plan that is negotiated among the parties can be made binding on all creditors, not just the creditors that agreed to it, but even creditors that objected to it. So it's a powerful tool. And if the business is salvageable, it's a route to return to profitability and the business going forward.
In your article, you discussed the alternatives, which were an assignment for the benefit of creditors and a voluntary workout. Can you give us some information on why a company might choose an assignment for benefit of creditors?
Yes, bankruptcy is not a one-size-fits-all solution. The Chapter 11 is a fairly expensive process from a legal fee standpoint. Congress has done some things to streamline the process, but there are depth caps involved in that, and it's not always right in every situation. Also, bankruptcy it's a public filing. Everyone's going to know about it, and that can impact the business and impact the value of the business. And so one alternative is the assignment for benefit of creditors, called an ABC in the trade, and effectively, an ABC is a state law procedure to sell the assets of a failing business while shielding the purchaser of those assets from liability for the old company's debts. So usually a distressed company is running out of money and has a limited time period to sell itself. And an ABC provides a method to promptly sell that business, protect the buyer, and to do that in a way that minimizes the transaction costs. And what happens in an ABC is the company assigns its assets to a neutral third party that the company picks, called the assignee. And that assignee is charged with the duty of going out and selling the assets and then paying the creditors. There's no court involved, and so it's not a public proceeding. It's not secret or confidential because creditors must be notified, but it's not as public. It's much quieter, which can be advantageous in certain circumstances. But the big benefit is that because the company picks the assignee, the process can be planned out. It can be prepackaged. A distressed company, a proposed assignee, and a party who wants to buy the assets of the failing company can negotiate a transaction and basically figure it all out and have it all lined up and then implement the ABC process. So there's certainty, and the process can proceed seamlessly with little impact on customers, employees, and other parties that are interested. So it's beneficial from that standpoint.
Well, those were the benefits for an ABC, but what would some cons be to using that as a solution?
Well, there are several downsides that have to be thought about. Most importantly is because there's no bankruptcy court, there's no automatic stay as you would get in a bankruptcy case. So if you have an angry secured lender who's trying to foreclose on the assets, you're not going to be able to stop that. So you need the cooperation of secured creditors in order for the process to succeed. Secondly, you do not have the power to cure defaults under contracts or to assume and assign contracts. It would have to be done purely on a voluntary basis by agreement with the counterparty to the contract. So if contract rights are a significant asset for the debtor, there can be some problems there because you don't have the same powers to transfer those to a purchaser as you would in a bankruptcy case. And then last, and perhaps most important, in a bankruptcy case, the buyer is going to get an order that validates its purchase and determines that the buyer has taken the assets free and clear of liens, claims, and encumbrances. So they're going to get nice, clean title blessed by the bankruptcy judge. In an ABC, there's no court, there's no judge, so there's no court order blessing the title. Instead, the buyer has to rely on the integrity of the process. So that it turns a little bit on the risk appetite that the buyer might have and how risk averse they are. Now, the other side of that is an ABC is much faster and much cheaper than a Chapter 11 case. And so the calculus is weighing the benefits I described of a Chapter 11 versus the speed, flexibility, and lower cost of an ABC, and deciding which process is appropriate in the particular situation.
And another alternative that you discussed was a voluntary workout. Why would a company want to use that as a solvency solution?
Well, ABCs are good if the solution, as it often is to sell the business as a going concern. But if the business owner wants to try and negotiate a repayment plan with its creditors, wants to continue to own the business and work out a repayment plan, then the voluntary workout is a viable alternative. And this is really purely a matter of negotiation between the debtor and some or all of its creditors. The general idea is for the parties by agreement to agree on a process or implement a process that would look a lot like a Chapter 11 process and have the parties engage in a Chapter 11 by agreement, but without actually filing a Chapter 11 case and not incurring the legal fees that would be incurred and not having the publicity and potential adverse effect on the business that a Chapter 11 filing would have. And the way these often work is a distressed company will call a meeting of its creditors. And, if the game plan is to have a global agreement with creditors, then you call a meeting of your creditors. The debtor will typically make a presentation at that meeting where it will describe its financial condition, how it got there, and what the debtor proposes to do to extricate itself from its predicament. The debtor will usually ask the creditors that are present to, first of all, form a creditors committee to appoint a subset charged with negotiating on behalf of the group, and for all creditors to agree to a moratorium on any collection actions. So in effect, to agree to an automatic stay and give the debtor the breathing spell while negotiations between the appointed committee and the debtor proceed. If creditors are willing to do that, they will typically ask the debtor to be completely transparent about its financial affairs and transactions it is engaged in. They will ask for information regarding the business and what's gone on. They'll do a lot of due diligence, and they'll ask the debtor to refrain from making any transactions out of the ordinary course of business, not to pay old debt, not to move money sideways, not to sell assets without discussing it with the committee, to basically implement the protections that there would be in a Chapter 11. And if the parties are able to agree on those kind of outlines, that shape of a table, if you will, then typically the game plan is to negotiate a repayment plan, which can be almost anything. It can be a portion of profits going forward. Maybe there's an investor out there who's willing to put money in and pay creditors a discounted amount. But the idea is to reach agreement on a plan and circulate that plan for agreement among all creditors. And the debtor will usually want a very high percentage of the creditors to agree to the plan. So the plan has to be fair and at least as good as would be in a Chapter 11.
drawbacks be to an voluntary workout?
Well, the drawbacks are, again, there's no court, so there's no automatic stay. So you have that issue, but also it relies on cooperation between the debtor and creditors and among creditors. So if creditors don't trust the debtor, if they think the debtor has defrauded them in some way, you're not going to have that trust, and it's just not going to work. It also relies on creditors agreeing to be treated equally. Creditors sometimes will bring lawsuits and try and jump to the head of the line. And if that occurs, then it can be hard to keep the process going, and it tends to break down. And then lastly, you have no ability to bind dissenting creditors as you would in a bankruptcy case. So holdouts can be a problem. If you have a large creditor who's holding out for better treatment, that can be a big issue because you don't have the ability to force them to agree.
Well, thank you for joining me today, Ben. If our viewers and listeners want to reach out to have you help them with bankruptcy or the alternatives of an ABC and a voluntary workout, how would they get in contact with you?
Well, I'd certainly be interested in talking to anyone who wants to, and I can be reached either by email at bgy@jmbm.com or by telephone at my office, 415-984-9626. Thank you very much, Tara. I've enjoyed chatting with you this morning.
Thank you. And if you would like help with the Paycheck Protection Program, we also have Dedecki and George Small and Markarian CPAs. They have successfully helped over 40 businesses secure $19 million in approved PPP loans. From funding to forgiveness, they're ready to help you. Visit cpaplus.com/PPPloan.php to get started, or call them at 559-431-5500, or visit them at cpaplus.com or at their Fresno location at 6000 North Palm. My next guest is Laura Timbrook. To view the full interview, we had to cut for time. Visit our YouTube channel at West Coast Industrial Solutions Magazine.
I'm here with Laura Timbrook of Manufacturing Wellness and Outspoken Nutrition podcasts to talk about productivity and workplace wellness within the manufacturing industry. Laura?
Hi, Tara. Thanks so much for having me. I am a national board certified health and wellness coach. I am a well-being strategist for the manufacturing industry, and I also run 2 weekly podcasts. The first one is Manufacturing Wellness, and that is really a podcast that's dedicated to wellness within the manufacturing industry. And I also run Outspoken Nutrition. That is a podcast that's just basic, all your health and wellness advice, simple and straightforward.
Thank you for reminding our previous viewers and introducing yourself to new viewers. Can you give us some background on how wellness can improve productivity in the manufacturing industry workplace?
Absolutely. You know, a lot of times we don't think of well-being and wellness and how it affects our productivity directly, but it's pretty amazing how much of our productivity is directly affected by what we are eating, how we are sleeping, and what we are doing. So this year, there was a really interesting book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. I started reading the book, and it's some really interesting research that has shown that for anybody that sleeps 6 hours a day, so if you were to sleep 6 hours a day for 11 days, your productivity is that of someone that hasn't slept for 24 hours. And that's pretty amazing because can you imagine somebody being on your facility floor that hasn't slept in 24 hours? I mean, the safety concerns that would come along with that. But yet, how many of our manufacturing workforce, or just in society in general, is only getting 4, 5, 6 hours of sleep? You know, it's recommended 6 to 8, but really what a lot of their research is showing, it really needs to be 8+ hours. So when we're only sleeping for 4 hours a night, it only takes 6 nights to be comparable to someone that hasn't slept for 24 hours. And the worst part is when we look at these sleep studies, the numbers never level off. They keep declining. So if you have been sleeping for 4 hours for, weeks on end, you're now on 48 or 36 hours of no sleep on a productivity line. So that's really scary when we start talking about that, and that's just one area of well-being. When I talk about my core principles of well-being, I have my foundationals, which is sleep and nourishment obviously being food and water. We have our sleep, we have our movement, we have our relationships, and we have our purpose. And all of these are within our well-being principles. So that sleep is just one portion. So then we look at the nutrition and the nourishment side. We already know nutrition really affects performance. Sports nutritionists have really proven that. I mean, just nutrient timing. So that is when an athlete eats certain foods based on their activity. In nutrient timing, that actually affects 10% of their performance. And that's just the timing of perfect nutrients. So for some of us that are eating diets that are less than what we really should be eating, how much that really affects us overall. One of the biggest things I hear when people get on diets is everything's so much clearer. I feel lighter. I can think so much quicker. I have more response and a ton of energy. And that's just within a couple days of cleaning up their diets, and not anything even really strict. A lot of times I'm recommending to people just to be adding in vegetables. So, just how much of that is really affected is really amazing. I mean, hydration. There was a study that showed 1% of a decrease in hydration affects our productivity level at 12%. So we can see how simple things of drinking water, eating our vegetables, and getting some sleep can drastically affect our productivity.
Definitely have to address Maslow's hierarchy of needs to ensure you have the foundation to be working at your best.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we also forget about the other side of that too, and that's our relationships and our purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So many accidents are caused by distraction. We have all kinds of statistics that say how many of our workplace, especially within manufacturing and an industrial sector, how much of that is accidents are by distraction from a cell phone. So we have protocols in place to help reduce those distractions. But think about how much distractions are coming from maybe just being hungry, or I skipped breakfast, or I didn't get to sleep at night, or maybe, all of that adds to those distractions. So we really want to make sure that when we are on the floor or we're walking into our office or a facility, that we are really at the best we can be. Now, of course, we can't control every aspects of life. Things still aren't going to go our way, but if we can balance the weight a little bit to make sure that the things we can control, like sleeping and nutrition and making sure we're getting in proper movement, we can control some of it. Movement, a lot of times we overlook, and we forget how much movement really plays a role in healthy joints and making sure those joints are lubricated so that we're not having workplace injuries or, getting arthritis or, shoulder pain. We see that so much in the manufacturing industry, especially with those repetitive motions.
Right. Ergonomics is a big component of that too. If you're doing repetitive movements, you want to protect your employees from injury.
And, I really like the idea of micro breaks. So we know in the manufacturing industry, we usually get our 30-minute lunch and we get our 15-minute breaks. But I like the idea of adding in these micro breaks as needed. Think about if you're working on an assembly line and your back starts really cramping up. You're now, again, distracted. You are now not the safest employee. So if we could take a few, maybe 2 minutes, and just come away for a moment and stretch our back, do some stretches. That way we can get back on the floor and perform better, and we're not worried about something cramping up and then maybe even, getting a back issue from that, and it's affecting our work the following day. So I really like that idea of micro breaks, of just stepping away. And even if it's in that issue where, let's say you got something running through your mind, step back a moment, clear it out, and then come back, so where you're fully focused.
A lot of the time, owners want to have their employees work straight through because they believe it leads to productivity. But if you give employees more breaks, they get the opportunity to stretch and to recenter on the task at hand, which is how you really improve productivity.
Absolutely. And there's been research that is being really done to shown how much of that, stepping away for a moment actually doesn't affect productivity at all. There was actually, right before we came on this call, I was actually reading another study that actually showed that there was some productivity issues and with machine maintenance. And they found if they took the machines offline more often and maintained them, it actually increased their productivity, even though, quote unquote, they were working less, just because of the maintenance on machinery. So imagine if you were maintaining our bodies in the same manner, we would probably have the same results.
You said movement is a big component of wellness. What are some tips you can give for different depending on different operating conditions?
So everyone is a little bit different, and of course, depending on how we're moving. But one of the things I like, it's simply just going for a walk. Just being able to walk. I mean, walking does so much with just even lowering our cortisol, with getting our blood pumping and moving. A lot of times there, it's funny because we get very confused on the difference between standing and moving. So often I hear people tell me that I don't sit down all day. Well, you might not sit down all day, but you're also not moving all day. It's the repetitive, maybe arm movements or lifting, but you're not actually getting that movement in. So on the simplest level, walking is the best. Now, if you're doing a lot of shoulder work, you want to stretch out those shoulders. You want to just simply get up and maybe, lift your arms up or stretch them in a way that you haven't been moving them. Another great one is if you're standing, especially if you're standing, in a static area, being able to lift your knees up and do kind of like a knee lift or your butt kicks, something like that, just to get the blood and movements moving. That's so important because, not only are we looking at it from the importance of, a movement level and joint health and muscle retention, but we are also looking at it from, just the well-being perspective of being able to move and not feeling so, tied up. It makes us feel, you have that release. You have that release both in your muscles and your tension, but also in your mind. So, my biggest thing is if you can get out and walk. I love if people have the ability to get out and walk. And I know a lot of times in manufacturing facilities, that's pretty easy because you're walking from facility to facility, and a lot of times it's outside. So even a few minute walk can really change your mindset, your feelings, how you're moving. It's a really good, simple solution. Of course, then if someone could bring in, a specialist, maybe an occupational therapist or a physical therapist or a fitness trainer, and give specific exercises that each employee can do for their specific jobs or for their specific tasks. That's like the best case scenario of having that. I don't know if you guys have a Wegmans out in the West Coast, but they had all their employees outside doing stretches before they started their shifts. I thought that was pretty cool.
And it's a good opportunity to build company morale, to have everyone take a break together and stretch or some similar movement activity.
Absolutely. You create that sense of community that you're kind of all in it together. And it does, and it's funny because how often would you hear employees saying, if they saw, one of their employees like moving their shoulders, oh, did you do your shoulder stretches today? It adds that accountability support. So we want our employees healthy.
I know some manufacturers have campus circuit training walking trails, and I know not all companies can do that, but they can create simple activities that integrate wellness into their company's culture.
And You said it perfectly. You said culture, and that's exactly what we want to build in these facilities. We want a sense of wellness culture, that wellness is a top priority, because not only is it going to make your employees feel valued, and that's really what we want. I mean, that's a huge benefit of employee retention, is when an employee feels valued. So if an employee feels that you're valuing their wellness, they're more likely to stay with you. And you keep your employees around longer, less workman's comps. There's so many benefits, but I love what you said too about, having those facilities or walking trails. I see more and more places putting in those walking trails again. It's also really important that, during breaks, our employees have access to healthier snacks. So simple solution on this is talk to your vending machine vendor and find out, keep the most common eaten snacks. So if your facility is a big Snickers bar facility, do not take the Snickers bars out of the facilities. You're just going to have a bunch of angry employees. But what we can do is maybe add in some almonds or some low salted pretzels, other options that would be healthier. So again, we're giving them the option to make healthier choices. And then of course, health fairs are a great idea. Nutrition or health coach consulting, group coaching for maybe weight loss or some specific issues is a good idea. But really just advocating eating lunch and having healthier options for our employees are a great way to start. And when we start, not feeding our bodies properly, that's when we start bringing in our, type 2 diabetes, our heart disease, all of this stuff. And, we know from research that type 2 diabetes with diet and exercise is reversible. And yet these are some of the most common, not only in the manufacturing industry, but in the entire US. We are dealing with the rise of diabetes, and even amongst children now. So it's something that if we can fix it so simply by, diet and exercise, it's really something that on, an organizational end, we really need to help advocate and support healthier choices, because it's really going to affect our workforce.
It is important for manufacturers to address that social and cultural shift to meet their skills gap, and it will definitely help attract younger generations to the industry.
Yeah, and I do think it is going to change. I'm a big proponent in trade schools, and I do think now that kids are starting to take a little bit of a look. I think a lot of times having that media out there and showing what the manufacturing workforce did, it was impressive. It made you feel like you wanted to be a part of that, because you made a great point with the society shift. That was showing manufacturers caring about their society, about their community, and we know that younger generation, that's another big portion for them.
There's been a lot of push for the college track over trade schools, and in my personal opinion, not everyone is made for that specific educational route. The next generation needs to be informed of their other options, and I think trade schools are a big deal.
Just reading, actually, there was a Facebook group about parents, and one parent was really upset that their son was looking at a trade school instead of a college. And of course, a bunch of us jumped in. We're like, why are you upset? No, this is like, I keep joking that trade school is going to be the next Ivy Leagues, because I really feel that we're going to make a shift closer to trades. And somebody came on that has worked a lifetime in trades, and he said, but you know what? He goes, there's something to be said about not having the pain from, years of doing the same labor over and over again. And he was talking about the physicalities of a job. But yet, if we could take those physicalities and reverse them and help support healthier, we can so much more attract that younger generation saying, come over to us. We're going to help you out. We're going to keep you safe. We're going to keep you healthy. OSHA's doing their parts, and they keep, getting better. And organizations, I see more and more manufacturing facilities, really advocating how long they've been accident free, which is great. We've seen so many facilities become smoke free. That's another great. So we're making these strides. And I really feel that, the manufacturing industry can really be on the cusp of employee wellness and well-being. I saw, the rise of corporate wellness really over the last 8 years working in corporate. And I know that the manufacturing can do the same because I've seen them starting to implement it. We just now, we focus on the safety protocols, and we're focusing on productivity. But now we need to start focusing on employee wellness. And one of the best ways to do that is starting to implement that wellness culture. There's so much that what we do on a daily basis can be turned into healthier choices throughout the day. And that's really what we want to focus on. So it's not about the fancy gyms and the fancy benefits. Sometimes it's about having the acknowledgement of what we do already can be used on a healthier approach. And that's one of the ways I approach most of our leadership training is we're looking at what we're currently doing and how we can do it a little bit better. And those small incremental changes make it sustainable. And that's really what we want. We don't want to I have seen so many health and wellness programs create more stress. That is not what we want to do. We want our health and wellness program to reduce our stress, to make us feel more in harmony with how we are fluctuating throughout the day. So small incremental changes is a sustainable approach, and it's going to keep going, and it'll make it so much easier than this big undertaking.
Thank you for joining me today, Laura. Is there anything else you would like to add?
I love this opportunity to come and talk. I know for manufacturing, kind of implementing wellness is new. It's not really been focused on. So I think it's a topic that we need to talk about because our workforce is worth it. And it's one of the reasons why I started the Manufacturing Wellness Podcast, because I want, people within the industry to see what others are doing and how we are supporting it. We have great organizations like, what you guys are doing at West Coast Industry Solutions in the magazine. And, there's other organizations like Women in Manufacturing. So there's so many of these great organizations that I keep hoping to highlight. So if anybody knows of other organizations, if they can contact me at lauratimbrook.com, that would be great. And if you don't mind me plugging, there is an employee retention summit coming up specifically for the manufacturing industry. So I'm actually going to be doing a talk on wellness and why employees stay. If you visit employeeretentionsummit.com, you can sign up and register all over there. There's some amazing speakers coming in because it's all about the manufacturing industry. I really hope 2021 becomes very strong for the manufacturing industry. So I really thank you for everything you guys are doing for the industry, manufacturing, agricultural. It's so important for everything out there.
And if our listeners and viewers wanted to get in contact with you, how would they reach you?
They can find me basically on any podcast platform. I am on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon. You can even say to Alexa, play Outspoken Nutrition, and I will pop up. Thank you so much, Tara. Thank you for having me.
And make sure to reach out to our sponsor today. It's ProTech Coatings. They do seamless floor and wall systems. They are OSHA, FDA, and USDA compliant. You can reach them at their Central California location, their Central Coast location, and their Northern California location. Their Central California is 559-323-8147. Central Coast is 805-455-3343. And their Northern California location is 717-540-4199, or you can visit them at protectcoatings.com for non-slip, antimicrobial, chemical resistant, and durable and decorative flooring and wall systems. And my final guest for the day is Kevin Fox. He's the Director of Marketing and Student Engagement at the Volt Institute. You can reach him at kfox@stancoe.org. Kevin?
Tara, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining. Can you give us a little background on yourself and Volt Institute?
Yeah, so I came to Volt Institute about 2.5 years ago now. It was a fantastic opportunity for me. And Volt Institute is an industry-led vocational training program specifically for the manufacturing industry locally. So the way Volt is structured is that we are partnered now with about 47 plus industry partners in our area, mostly food processing, because of course we live here in the beautiful California Central Valley. But we do touch on some fabrication and some aerospace as well. And ultimately our investors or our partners were in this critical phase where they couldn't find skilled labor. And I know all up and down the valley in a lot of different industries were experiencing the same thing. So we asked them, what is it that your labor force needs to know? And they began to tell us. And as they laid that out, we began to structure our training program specifically, again, for local manufacturing. So ultimately, it's an 8-month program. We take a variety of students. Sometimes they are from industry and we are upskilling those folks. Sometimes they are, as we say, right off the street and right out of high school, maybe the only job that they've had is delivering pizza or a barista at Starbucks. And in an 8-month period of time, we're able to skill them up with a baseline foundation to be a maintenance mechanic in the manufacturing industry.
Thank you for that, Kevin. And what are some things that you had to do in order to pivot for the pandemic in your education?
That is a really great question. Of course, everybody's bobbing and weaving through this thing because we just don't know, right? We don't know what's around the corner, and every Tuesday we don't know what the governor's going to say next. So, we made some adjustments immediately. There was a period of time, of course, like everybody, we had to close down. Luckily for us, because our theory-based, the theory portion of the skill sets that students are learning are web-based. So they can access them while they're here on campus, or they can access them while they're at home. So we asked every student to keep up with their studies as best they could, dealing with COVID and life happening outside the building. And as they progressed, we looked to those students that were the furthest along in the program. And when we were able to open our doors and invite students back onto campus, we chose those students to come back by appointment to do their hands-on skills training. So it ended up working out very well for us over the last, where we're in, it's hard to tell what month we're in now, the shutdown, but we were able to graduate 5 or maybe even 7 off the top of my head students and continue progressing them. And as a matter of fact, many of those students had jobs, employment with our partners before they even finished the program. So we're still in that process. We are accepting students now that we have our doors open and we are back on campus. So we are enrolling, but those ones that were in our COVID period are now wrapping up the program, and we are accepting their resumes and helping them with job placement. And I got to tell you, it's still an incumbents market, I guess you should say, because I'm still getting 2 to 3 job postings a week from our industry partners, and phone calls are, how many you got? Who can I get? Who can I see? Because, it's all a struggle for us right now.
Definitely, and we've learned how essential manufacturing is, especially during the pandemic, and they definitely need their workforce in order to be able to keep up with the demand.
I would agree. I think workforce is essential. And, you've got kind of a theme going on your show today. This holistic kind of attitude that we should all be adopting. If your company is not, making adjustments to cross-train folks to fill some of those positions as they go out. And I know this is a big picture. This pandemic is sort of a big picture thing, but even on a day-to-day regular basis, if you're not cross-training people, you're really missing an opportunity. And hopefully this pandemic has opened the eyes to some folks. So.
And you have multiple training programs. Can you give us a little more information about each one?
Sure, absolutely. We actually train from top to bottom. So we train for folks that are in the boardroom all the way down to the lunchroom. So at the top, we have our senior leadership training, which are decision makers, those folks that are really making decisions that are going to be between the black and the red. That is I believe it's a week-long training. We do training for frontline supervisors with our supervisor development training in partnership with AgSafe as well. And that's incredible because, as you know, very often, and this pandemic will illustrate that, very often when you need somebody in a pinch, you grab them and you throw them into a supervisor's or a team leader position, but they really don't have a background for it. And it's kind of a sink or swim situation. So we put together a program with AgSafe where in 6 meetings spread out over a period of time, you can get some information, take that back to the workplace, put it into practice, then bring it back and share that experience with your peers in that same classroom. It's a really incredible way to experience that, as opposed to somebody just talking at you. Here's the policy, here's what you do in this situation. You really get to bounce the ideas. This is what happened to me, and somebody else in the room, your classmates, can say, well, I did this and made this adjustment and it worked out better, or sometimes it works out worse. So you learn from others' mistakes as well. So moving down from there, of course, we have our Gary Baudet is training for our career accelerator program. We call it CAP, and he's made some adjustments for that as well in an online capacity for personal growth and professional growth as well. So that can be anybody in the company, from your regular operator all the way up the line, and definitely you'll walk away with strategy, lean processes, efficiency training, kind of conceptual stuff that every company needs in order to stay profitable.
Thank you, Kevin. And what's one of the proudest accomplishments that Volt Institute has had?
So great question, thank you. In 2019, we were named one of the top 3 programs in the state of California at the it's the PI Award, Partnerships in Industry and Education. The governor gave us that. We have a 96% job placement rate with our students and our partners. I love to brag about that. It really is it really is a holistic kind of front when they come through the door and hand me an application, all the way to the end where they're handing me their resume and we're trying to get them placed into a position, because I have a real opportunity over 8 months as student engagement to learn who these students are, what they're about, are they reliable, do they really understand what it's like out there in manufacturing in the workforce. And I try really hard to match students. Now, we're not a job placement service, right? But I try really hard to match the student with a company where I'm aware the culture is going to best suit them, right? Where I can see them elevate and move on. What we're seeing, and my hopes are as student development, is to create in our area an alumni that 10 years from now, my students that graduated Volt Institute are going to be the head of maintenance in any given facility, and they're going to be calling me to ask me what they're asking me now, how many students you got, who can I hire, because I know that they fully understand what this program is about, and I'm trying to create a food chain in the sense of skilled labor, and that's beginning to happen. Just briefly, we had a first-year student, his name is Jorge. He was a teacher when he came to this program, was a teacher for about 5 years in grade school, real good at people management, obviously, because he's a teacher, but just decided, I don't want to do this. And of course, you can really drop, $70,000, $80,000 getting your degree to be a teacher. And then in 5 years to decide that's not for me, and find yourself in a program like Volt Institute where it's $7,250 and only 8 months, is quite a life change for him. So fast forward 3 years now from when he graduated the program, he is now the maintenance supervisor at Houston Nut Company. And I just invited him back for a free PLC training and had the opportunity to talk to him. And lo and behold, last week we had a conversation on the phone and he's asking me, what students do I have to send to his department? And that's exactly the culture we want to create with Volt all across the valley, because I think that is really the approach that we have to take to solve the skilled labor problem.
And you mentioned that you work with a lot of food processing companies. What are some other industries and manufacturers that you would like to expand Volt Institute with?
So yeah, we of course we are ag centric, right? I love that about this place, the valley. But there are other manufacturers out there. So aerospace is moving in our direction because it's unsustainable in the Bay Area. It's sexy to be over in the Silicon Valley, but you can't afford the real estate, right? And your manpower, your labor is here anyway. So if you want to create that culture where people are happy in your industry, come on out to the California Central Valley. Our water is cheap. Here in Modesto, we got MID, so you don't have to worry about power shutdowns or anything like that as well. And there's plenty of space to grow. So aerospace is one of those things that are moving our direction, and we're having talks with. Fabricators are a big deal, especially, like all manufacturing. It's tough to find good machinists these days. So we service a lot of fabricators as well. And we're in talks with, some pretty big brand names that are, like I said, moving into this area. So.
And if current manufacturers and future students want to reach out to you, how would they get in contact with you?
The easiest way to get a hold of us is voltinstitute.com. So you can check out our website. We have tons of information on the Contact Us page. If you fill in the web form, if you see this program, you have any specific questions for me, you can fill in the web form. Just leave me a little comment at the bottom. Hey, Kevin, saw you with Tara on the show, and those emails come directly to me. So voltinstitute.com is kind of the one-stop place. If you want to have personal conversation, 209-566-9102. You can call me. It rings right through to my cell phone. I'm almost available almost 24 hours a day. Yeah, those are the two best ways to get a hold of us. And if you want an inkling about what's going on here, social media, check out our social media, our Instagram, our Facebook. We're now on LinkedIn. So if you are, a plant supervisor or in that portion of the industry, check us out, see what we're doing, and get involved.
Thank you, Kevin. And I look forward to being able to potentially visit Volt Institute and check out.
Yes, you're definitely invited down. I'd love to show you, and thank you so much for having me today. It's always a pleasure.
Have a good one. Make sure to reach out to our sponsor, Fine Print Plus. They're your source for printing, packing, and promotion. They do graphic design, print and copies, custom apparel, promotional items, parcel service, and they just recently started a will call and delivery service. You can reach them at area code 559-237-4747 or email them at graphics@fineprintplus.com or request a quote at fineprintplus.com/quote. And now we will have a moment of silence for our Black Lives Matter community.